On this episode, we visit Honolulu, Hawaii. We talk with the Department of Transportation Services about complete streets. Then we learn why the Department of Health wants to make Hawaii more walkable. Finally, AARP wants to make Hawaii friendlier and less dangerous for elderly pedestrians. Stay tuned.
We're in Honolulu talking with Mark Garrity, who's Deputy Director of the Department of Transportation Services. What does the department do?
Good morning, John. Yeah, what we do is the Department of Transportation Services has 4 divisions. We have traffic engineering, which means we deal with striping on the streets and lanes and things like that. Also includes sidewalks, bike paths, and whatnot. All that falls under traffic engineering. We also have a public transit division, which oversees operation of the bus. So all of the city bus service on Oahu is run by the Department of Transportation Services. We have our traffic signals and technology branch, so we also run all of the traffic signals on Oahu. And finally, we have our transportation planning division, which actually does the long-range planning for the island of Oahu and also the federal compliance and things like that.
And not long ago, Hawaii passed a complete streets law. What's complete streets and what did the law do?
Well, complete streets means thinking about all modes of transportation rather than just cars. It means creating a street network and environment that works for everyone, including pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit riders, and taking into account that there are young people and old people who don't have access to a car, and that really we should be creating and operating and maintaining an environment that really works for everybody. And as the population ages, we want to make sure that people can, as we say, age in place, that they don't have to go to a special home or something just because they can no longer drive, but that they can still access the things they need. So that means being able to live in an environment and be able to walk to the store, be able to walk to your neighbor's place, be able to get to a bus stop and take the bus to where you need to go and have all of those things in place. And that's what we're trying to create here on Oahu.
So what does the complete streets law have you do that might be differently than what you were doing 10, 20, 30 years ago?
Well, I think, just like many places in the United States, what Oahu did 20 or 30 years ago was primarily focus on the needs of drivers and setting up an environment that was conducive to driving everywhere. What the Complete Streets ordinance and law does, and really what we want to do anyway, is help us move towards that multimodal environment that I was talking about. It does require us to consider all modes of transportation whenever we are designing streets, opening new streets, operating streets, maintaining streets. So for example, as we go through and repave streets where it's possible, we're adding bike lanes and things like that. And then with rail transit coming on board, it's more important for us than ever to create that kind of multimodal environment where people can feel comfortable and that there are options for when you get off the train, you can get to an office or your home or whatnot. If it's only a quarter mile or a half mile away, is the walking environment conducive to being able to make that trip without using a car? It's really important that we put these things in place so that people feel comfortable not owning a car or not using a car, and that's going to ultimately make us a better place to live.
And rail transit, when's it going to open, and what sort of opportunities has it given you?
Mm-hmm. Well, the rail transit system is under construction now, and in fact, if you go out to the western part of Oahu, you can already see there's about a mile of guideway that's been constructed. It's a 20-mile system with 21 stations. It's going to provide options for us to develop in the future in a way that's much more compact and pedestrian friendly. The typical development pattern on Oahu over the last 30 or 40 years has been suburban sprawl, even though we live on an island where there's limited amounts of land. And so in the future, by having the rail transit available, we're going to be able to concentrate a lot of the future development around the stations, and that will create an environment that is more conducive to people simply walking, bicycling, and using transit to where they need to go.
Back here and existing intersections on existing streets, what are some of the issues you have dealing with crosswalks at intersections?
Right. So one of the things that we're looking at through the Complete Streets Ordinance is we're doing an implementation study that we're going back and looking at all of our design standards, our details, and seeing if they're still appropriate. And in a lot of cases, things like corner radius or a lack of crosswalks has made it difficult for people to walk. And so what we want to do is examine all of those details and ensure, for example, that at an intersection, there are crosswalks on all legs, things like that. This is something we haven't done a good job of in the past. But with the Complete Streets Ordinance, we have an opportunity to review all of those design standards and make sure that they are compatible with a complete streets environment, and that they actually encourage and allow people to walk and get to where they need to go in a convenient manner.
And visitors to the island who may be sort of concentrated in certain areas of the island, what changes might they see over the coming years that make it a little easier for them to get around without renting a car?
Well, Waikiki is where many of our visitors locate when they come to Oahu, and that is already a fairly pedestrian-friendly environment. I think what's going to happen in the future is that's going to become even more pedestrian-friendly, and then other parts of the island will sort of catch up and become more pedestrian-friendly. One of the things that the rail station will provide is there's going to be a station at the airport, so visitors coming in will be able to take the train initially to Ala Moana, which is close to Waikiki, and then certainly many of the attractions that people might go to, like the Arizona Memorial, are close to a future rail station. So I think that visitors in the future, once the rail station opens, will feel more comfortable not renting a car, because they'll be able to get to many of the places that they want to go using a combination of rail and bus transit. We're also looking at a bike share system. So having a bike share system in place will allow people, both locals and visitors, to feel comfortable getting to those places that maybe it's a bit too far to walk, but an easy bike ride. And in Hawaii we have a wonderful climate. It's easy for people to bicycle around. Many of the areas where people might want to bicycle is flat, and so we feel like a bike share system is going to be very successful. And of course there are many other things that are happening in other cities that are also coming here, things like car share and ride sharing and whatnot. These things are here or coming, so we feel like that array of options is really what is going to give people the comfort of realizing, I don't really need a car. Between all these other things, I can get around just fine. And we want both visitors and residents to feel that way. That's what we're trying to do.
So as to come back in 10 years, 20 years, what would mark success? What would say that the place is a better place for pedestrians?
Well, I think if you came back 20 years from now and let's say you flew in, that you can get off your plane, walk out of the airport, and the rail station is open and the trains are running frequently, and you just walk onto a train and you get off close to your destination, and you're able to comfortably exist and walk on Oahu without feeling like you're a second-class citizen, where your basic needs are being met without relying on a car. And I think those are the things that I would see as a success. If I'm able to be a visitor or be a resident of Oahu, and knowing that between all of the options that I have, you know what, I don't really need a car, and it's working just fine. And I think that's, if I see a lot of people feeling that way, then I know that we've done a good job.
We're talking with Heidi Hansen-Smith with the State of Hawaii Department of Health. What do you do for them?
Hi, I'm actually with the Chronic Disease Promotion and Health Prevention Division. We work on chronic disease prevention, obviously. And I work a lot on the physical activity side, so encouraging physical activity and promoting it through working in our built environment, looking at creating healthy community designs, getting people out to be active as part of their day instead of just telling them that we need to get out after work and get another, hour, half an hour of physical activity in.
So walking can be an important part of physical activity?
Walking's a really important part. In fact, studies have shown that even just short bouts of walking, so if you're walking to a transit stop maybe for 10 minutes in the morning and walking to get some lunch in the afternoon and then going back to your transit stop in the afternoon, you're getting your 30 minutes of physical activity. It's part of your day. You probably don't even notice that you're getting that in. We call it sort of stealth physical activity.
And how important is the physical environment to getting people to walk more or bicycle more?
Right, it's actually incredibly important. People need to feel safe. There has to be places for pedestrians to be. It's also really important to have destinations for pedestrians, shade. They have to be sort of away from cars, and even bicyclists, if they're on the same path, can be a little bit hazardous for pedestrians. So I think the environment pretty much is everything. If you have a safe sort of just safe access for pedestrians, it's going to encourage people to get out and walk.
And the health department doesn't actually own the streets, the sidewalks, the buildings. Who do you have to work with to make all this happen?
Right, we do not own them. And in fact, there's sometimes it's both the private businesses and landowners, as well as especially the city and county and the state departments of transportation do a lot of work and make those connections and are able to actually add sidewalks and bike lanes and that kind of infrastructure when they are touching our roads, new roads, or redoing roads. So they've been really big partners of ours. We try and support their work, especially as their staff is sort of doing this new paradigm shift from just moving cars, as transportation I think has done for so many of the past decades, to actually moving people and thinking about infrastructure for all users.
So do you have any particular initiatives going on at the moment?
Yes, we always have several going on. So we've been really working closely, like I said, with the transportation officials, as well as advocates like the bicycling leagues, AARP, those folks, in every county to implement our complete streets policies that we have. So that is really, like I said, helping all of our streets to accommodate all users whenever possible. And we're also working with a large group in Honolulu to kick off a bike share project, which may sound like that doesn't have a lot to do with pedestrians, but like I said, when bikes have their own space and the infrastructure to get off the sidewalks and be away from pedestrians, separated when possible, then it's a lot safer for pedestrians, especially our elder population. We hear that a lot. And we're also working on a new agreement we have with the Centers for Disease Control, CDC, and they're really looking at, in the adult population, how do we encourage walking? And there's several opportunities there and strategies that we're looking at. Among them is working on social support. So how in the work site do you encourage folks to walk, whether that's to get out for walking meetings, get out at lunch for a walk, perhaps use active transportation to get to work if there's a possibility of that. Looking at how we implement our community plans, whether that's our complete streets policies, our pedestrian master plan. Those things need to be implemented, not just sitting on the shelf, to really get people out there and walking. So that's all part of it.
And from the broader public health perspective, we get more people walking. What's it going to show up in the things that you look at?
Okay, well, hopefully we think that there's going to be an increase in physical activity, which would be great. But bottom line is we're looking at, like, the nation, there is an obesity epidemic, we can call it that. There's even in Hawaii, we have to do something about that, which really leads to all those chronic diseases we're trying to prevent. So we hope to actually see a drop in things like diabetes rates, especially in our youth. Childhood obesity is something we're really trying to work on.
We're in Honolulu talking with Barbara Kim Stanton, who's State Director for AARP Hawaii. What is AARP Hawaii?
Well, AARP Hawaii is an organization that is dedicated to educating and advocating for the 50 plus. And we look at things like financial security, health care, and also having your best life. And part of having your best life is making sure you have a livable community.
And where does walkability and pedestrian comfort and safety fit into that?
Well, unfortunately, Hawaii has the dubious distinction of being considered the most dangerous place in the entire country to be a pedestrian over the age of 65. A report came out in 2014 called Dangerous by Design, and Hawaii ranked at the very top, saying that for pedestrians who are in their senior years, crossing the street is taking your life in your hands. And we wanted to do something about that at AARP.
So where do you get started on a problem like that?
Well, interestingly enough, with that statistic, we had a grassroots group, and these included our members. We have 150,000 members in the state of Hawaii, and also people of all ages. And we said we have a checklist of features that make an intersection much safer. Come out and do a checklist check with us on some of the most dangerous intersections in Hawaii. So 250 volunteers came, and it was very exciting because you could see they were very interested in how to make their neighborhoods much safer. And after we did the checklist, we turned that into the State Department of Transportation, asking them to put renewed effort and funding into making the intersection safe. That led to the 2009 Complete Street State Law, one of the toughest in the country. And now where we are is we have the 4 counties looking at ordinances to also have complete street ordinances. And Honolulu County passed the first ordinance. The other counties, the other 3 counties are in process. But Honolulu County, which has about 90% of our 1.4 million population, is where all the crashes are concentrated. So this was a particularly good county to start with. And in 2013, AARP Hawaii, along with some of our partners, contacted Mayor Kirk Caldwell and said, beyond pedestrian safety, we also have to look at public places. We have to look at how to connect people to make sure that our seniors are not isolated. And so that led to the age-friendly initiative.
So what got your interest in working on pedestrian safety before that 2014 report came out?
Well, it really was a call by the grassroots. Our community members were really tired of seeing fatality after fatality because our streets weren't safe. Because we have always said you can do pedestrian education just so much and driver education so much. A large chunk of that has to be smart design and engineering. And so we said what we needed was, for pedestrian safety to really work, we needed complete streets. We needed a whole way of thinking that the roads are just not only for the vehicles, they're also for the pedestrians, they're for the bicyclists, they're for all modes of transportation. And we wanted people to get away from thinking that the roads were only for cars. And so that's how we got into complete streets and passed a very strong law. In 2009, when we passed it, it was the strongest law in the country. And I think it still is. From there, we started working with the counties, and we started with Honolulu County. The city and county of Honolulu has about 90% of the population of our 1.4 population. Now, in addition to the 1.4 population, we also have a sizable number of tourists who come. And so for 1.4 million residents, we have about 7.5 million tourists a year. And tourists, when they're on vacation, they're not necessarily thinking about safety. They're pretty carefree. They're pretty much awed by Honolulu's stunning beauty. And they're in play mode. And we have to make sure that even if you may not be really vigilant, that the design will be smart enough to reduce the number of pedestrian crashes. So we got very excited about working on a more livable community for the city and county of Honolulu. And we launched with Mayor Kirk Caldwell, the Honolulu mayor, something we call Age-Friendly Cities Honolulu. And that looks at not just complete streets, which would be the sharing of the roadways with drivers of vehicles and those on bicyclists and pedestrians, but also how to change the landscape, the design of Honolulu. So you would have a different way of zoning so that people aren't running across 6 lanes of highway to get to the bus stop. Or we're looking at why can't we encourage walking by having the grocery store a quarter mile away. And so it's very exciting to see the transformation of a city and the focus on more pedestrians being able to walk in Honolulu safely.
Who are your key partners here in Hawaii? Is it, what's the role of the state government versus, the individual county governments on the different islands? Even is there a role for the federal government in all this? Who are the big players that are going to make this happen?
Well, the interesting thing in a small state like Hawaii, which is the only island state, and as I said, has 1.4 million people, is that it's really like the biggest small village in the country. We work with our federal representatives very closely in Congress to see how we can tap into federal dollars. For instance, Honolulu has the biggest capital improvement project on its books with the coming of the rail project. And with the rail project, you're going to have 22 new transit-oriented development opportunities to reshape how you're going to have a mixed-use community. So that's the federal dollars. And the federal dollars, of course, also augment dollars for city transportation. And then we have our state legislators. Now, the state was the one which set the framework, because the state is the one that passed the 2009 Complete Streets Law. And then eventually you get down to where the rubber meets the road, and that's always the mayor and the city, and how you implement. But the state and the city, they work side by side, and it's because on the stretches of road we have all along the corridors, at some intersections it becomes a state road turns into a county road. And then from the highways, this is done with federal dollars, and that some of the ramps go right into county roads, or they might go right into state roads. So you need tremendous coordination in the planning, tremendous coordination on where your priorities are going to be for dollars, so that you're not doing scattered projects. So everybody is working on the same planned list as to what you're working on first. Because otherwise, you're tearing up the street for one federal project, and 2 years later you tear it up again for a state project, and it doesn't make sense. And so this close coordination is essential for any transportation project. So we're very glad that we have such an issue on livable communities and age-friendly projects, that all three levels of government are 100% behind this project.
And if you're successful, how is this going to benefit your members? How's life going to be better for a senior citizen in Hawaii?
Oh, we'd love to see the next Dangerous by Design report come out that says Hawaii, the safest place in America to walk the streets safely and be healthy. And I think that if we could just flip those numbers from the most dangerous place in Hawaii for a pedestrian over the age of 65 to the safest place in America for the 65 and older pedestrians and the most enjoyable place to walk, then I think that we will all feel pretty good about the projects.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.